hello. Hey, what are we talking about? All right, digital nomads. So here, you were a pioneer about being a digital nomad. Can you tell a little bit, put the audience in context, what you've done? Because you've created like several companies, been CTO, been developer at Magister. You have been a scuba diving instructor. Is there something you haven't done?
Plenty of things, and I still have a lot of time. I've never been in South America.
You've never been. And what brought you to actually become so? First of all, what brought you into development? Because you're CTO you're a pirate CTO on Twitter. So you've been leading the role of CTO in many companies right now at Zinio, but before you were Rakuten Europe and some other companies. So what brought you into software development first?
So my career is pretty standard, except this thing, right?
Except this thing, yeah.
If you think about an engineer, I started as a junior developer in a very small city north of Madrid. I started as a junior developer, mid-level, senior developer. At some point, I came to Barcelona, and then I started taking gigs in product and engineering until I became a CTO. But we engineers sometimes are, we're interesting people.
Yeah.
So at some point, I was really overburned by the whole thing. And I said, something has to change, right? There was a lot of crisis, a lot of black clouds on top of everyone. And I said, fuck it, can I say that?
Yeah, well, you can say, you said it already.
So I basically packed everything. I sold everything I had, which wasn't much. And I said, look, I'm going to just get on a flight towards, I think it was Singapore at the time. And I'm not coming back until I run out of money. One-way ticket.
Yeah, great.
And I said, I want to do a lot of things except programming.
Yeah.
So then I became a PADI instructor. I started teaching diving and plenty of other gigs, fruit picking, whatever could bring me $1. But then there was something interesting. It was a long time ago that we had a massive volcano eruption in Europe. Maybe some of you would remember
Iceland,
in Iceland.
Right? Yeah.
So it was during Easter, and that basically put all the flights in the ground. Everyone, nobody could get their Easter holidays at that time. And I was a diving instructor. I relied heavily on tourism. So I was on the dive center without anything to do. And so I said, well, I'll get out my laptop and start programming again. And I actually started getting messages and phone calls and emails from old clients or colleagues who needed some help at the time. They wanted to work with me, but in Spain. For some reason, they actually wanted to see my face, which I cannot know why. So for some of those, about half of them, I told them, look, what if I reduce my consultant hourly fee a little bit, and you forget about that thing that I'm on somewhere on a secluded beach in Malaysia?
Yeah.
And actually, some of those accepted. And we started creating this nice relationship with this, and things were working out pretty well, until the point that I was actually mixing scuba diving in the morning and coding in the afternoon. And that started growing and growing and growing until I realized that I wasn't spending the money I saved for the trip. I was actually making money because I was not spending anything. I was in a country where living was very cheap. I was diving every day, which removed all this black cloud and all this crisis thinking from my mind. And I found an organic way of doing this. And slowly I found even ways to create different companies, startups along the way, work with different people who were doing something like that. Of course, at that time, we didn't call it digital nomadism because the concept was not there. But we knew a few of us were there until we created this organic way of doing it.
And how did you scale it? Because so scaling a consultancy or a software development business is complicated. You would think that more people bring in more revenue, but also brings more associated costs, right? How do you do it if you don't even know where the rest of your employees are? Like, how did you scale your development hours in your company?
I don't think you need to know where they are, even if you have an office.
Of course, yeah.
Because at the end of the day, development or producing software, like many other things, it just has an output. And an output where you heavily rely on what your artists, what your engineers know how to do it. You cannot tell someone, you have to do this in this many hours, and that's it. Well, you can do it, but then we've seen plenty of disasters coming from that. So if you trust people, if you work with smart people, responsible people, why it matters where they are.
Exactly. So one of the things that we actually get when we run software development agencies is, clients want us to be in their office, right? And they're like, hey, how do I know whether your employees are working? Like, hey, how do I know that your employees in your office are working? How did you address that back in the day?
Well, there was a few options. I think we had to trust people because
on your side, yeah, but how about the client?
the client didn't care because we just provided a good product.
Yeah.
And it was cheaper than what we had. So at the beginning, it was only one project, then it was two, then it was three, and suddenly things started growing to the point that we said, hey, that's it. I'm going to get 2 weeks into the jungle. I'm not going to have connection, so I don't want to work for the next 2 weeks. So in that case, it was not so much about scaling yourself as a company, because we were not looking for increasing profits or working for shareholders, dividends or anything like this. It was a lifestyle business. So as long as I had enough to pay my bills and continue traveling and continue learning and enjoying, I didn't need to scale anymore. So a lot of has been written about this. We have the 4 hours work week from Tim Ferriss and many other people who write about this. And at the end of the day is not how you scale your team to become bigger and bigger, but the opposite. Less is more.
And what happened with clients who didn't buy into this? It's like, you still need to come at least once a week to our office. I want to see you from time to time. How did you address this?
At the beginning, I didn't work with them.
Well, that's right.
And of course, it meant that in some cases, I didn't have work for a few weeks. So I just went to the mountain or went into a boat or disappeared. However, some of those actually came around and started working with me and with us later in time. Because I think it's a cultural change.
Yeah.
When we started doing it, pretty much nobody was doing the same thing.
There barely were Wi-Fi's everywhere, right?
Now it is. Now
Yeah,
now you can land in any airport in the world and buy a 5G SIM card and get connection. Before, you could buy a SIM card with maybe 60 minutes of phone calls, but that was it.
What year was it that we gave the full context?
2000 and something, between 5 and 6.
Yeah.
And so
No open Wi-Fi's everywhere, yeah.
But now we have co-working spaces everywhere.
Yep.
My co-working space at that time sold Big Macs.
Yeah.
So that was pretty much it.
I remember reading your book. So he wrote a couple books about being a digital nomad, right? I highly recommend them. Because he explains the funny stories, basically. We know it's hard to be a digital nomad. Everybody thinks that being a digital nomad is working from a beach in Bali with like a pina colada and making tons of money and like drop shipping products like Tim Ferriss does. But it's not like that, right? It's like not finding Wi-Fi, not being capable, like fucking up with the time zones and then missing important clients' calls and things like that. So I remember there was one story you told about being in the middle of the freaking desert in Australia, finding for like signal to call somebody, and you couldn't find it. Can you explain that? Because I think it's really good.
Right. So we had, at that time we were a threesome. There was my today's wife and Roxanne, which was a Toyota Hayase van that was older than me. And it was the three of us just driving around the outback in Australia. So at some point, of course, we had our own little generator and one big antenna to get connection and one 3G dongle. That was barely enough for a Skype call. And so we were in the middle of the outback. There was probably nothing except deadly things.
That's Australia, yeah?
Around 500 kilometers around us. And there we were, both my wife and I, we had calls to attend. And
But you were working for Couchsurfing back then, or was your
We
agency?
both were working for Couchsurfing.
Yeah, it was Couchsurfing times.
And we had a few issues and a few things to deal with. But it was not a big deal. We were prepared for it, right? So we had our generator, we plugged our laptops, and there we were, in the middle of the fucking desert, with nothing around us, one big antenna, and a generator running, brrr, and with two MacBooks. I was like, what these guys are doing here? What's going on? I mean, if there was any Aborigine in there looking at us, he would be flipping out.
Bitcoin mining, right?
Yeah, probably. Out of Opal.
Not yet.
So we managed to, after you know the thing we used to do in the past with our phones, trying to look for signal?
Yeah.
So we were doing exactly that, trying to get just a few drops of signal. And we finally found one. We stick the dongle to a tree, the only tree around, and managed to get connection. So we go in, we start making a call. And we had this camping table, and so we start working on that, making our calls. And at some point, this was the middle of the night, like 10, 11 p.m., it was pitch black. So we only had the light of our laptops and the little Apple thingy on the laptop. And at some point, a shadow starts coming behind us, approaching, and I couldn't even say anything. And I said, Laura, turn back, or maybe not. So she turns back, and there's like a fucking kangaroo here trying to sneak into the video call. Now, the funny thing is that the guy on the video call was seeing that and didn't say anything.
I was like, probably the first time, he's the first digital nomad that's actually a kangaroo.
Yeah.
How many times have you missed an important call because of different time zones, you not adjusting, or like, things like that, I'm missing, or I didn't find any stable connection, because, I find myself when I do this, and I was in the Gili Islands, remember, in Indonesia, and like the power went out in 3-4 islands for 3 days, right? And it's like, well, I can't work.
Yeah. Well, it happens. It happens.
How many times did it happen to you? How do you solve it?
I didn't count them, but it happens. In some cases, I've moved places.
Yeah.
I've moved from one island to another just to make that call. At the end of the day, I think one of the key elements for the digital nomad is willpower. So you have to be able to, you're on the beach, and suddenly you have a group of teenagers or 20-something.
Or sea lions.
And they tell, no, let's go party. This is this great full moon party going on.
Yeah.
And then you're there with your computer. No, I can't. I have to send a very important email. It's like, what? Yeah, you miss calls or you miss appointments, but if you settle expectations properly and you have this level of confidence with your clients, then it works. Now, it's true that whenever I had something important, like a call with investors or something like this, I did stay in big cities.
Yeah.
So that kind of works, and you always have to have a plan B and plan C and plan D in these cases. But yeah, slowly getting there.
Let's address another concern that there is in the digital nomad / remote working world, which is the loneliness, right? We don't interface with each other so much as when we are actually in the same office. So you don't get to see the people, you don't get to see the reactions, their emotions, and it's difficult to spot that your co-founders / team members, whatever, they are either depressed, not motivated, there's something going on with them. So how did you deal with that? And actually, it's a thing, right? You don't get out of your place for many days, sometimes weeks if you're a software developer. So it's kind of like, it's hard to address this. How did you use it?
Well, I think there's absolutely nothing like FaceTime.
Yeah.
And I'm obviously the biggest advocate of remote work and digital nomadism, but there's absolutely nothing like meeting your peers face-to-face, going for beers, creating relationship.
Yeah.
So what we did in the day was work with people that we have worked with in the past, that we had this relationship from before. Funny enough, we encountered people along the way who joined our little community. So we found people who were also traveling with their laptops and realized, hey, we're not the only ones. We don't have a name for this thing that we're creating together, but we're not the only ones. So maybe we stayed for a month together working on a kind of camp, and then, boom, the relationship was created. In any case, the loneliness is more for yourself, or not feeling like you're progressing or you're working with people, you're creating something that's bigger than yourself in a way. And actually that's, in a way, one of the reasons why I'm back in Barcelona. It's very difficult to create a bigger team with a much bigger project without this initial FaceTime connection. I think that more and more, the more we are progressing in this model, we're improving how we do things. So now it's very common that companies do 1 or 2 retreats a year. Full remote companies, they actually get together to get to know each other and to learn about the kinks from each one. In Couchsurfing, we did that. Once a year, we had a retreat, so we rented a house somewhere in the world, in Costa Rica, in Thailand, in Istanbul, and that was the way that the team got together and created this relationship. But again, this is no different than the work in the office. So I'm sure in all your companies, there is people that you don't speak with for weeks or months,
Yeah.
right?
You didn't even know the names, right?
Or the names. Probably they sit just 50 meters from you or 20 meters from you, but you don't speak with them.
Yeah.
Or maybe you just send them a Slack message. And that Slack message is dreadful, is normally the key of most of the communication problems. Until you actually go and speak face-to-face with that person, nothing really happens. You don't create rapport, you don't create relationship. So what I came to understand is that the problems of the digital nomad are exactly the same ones that normal companies, or especially big companies, multinational companies, have as well. What's the difference between working with someone on the beach in Malaysia or in Indonesia, or someone in your other office in New York City?
Yeah.
Same thing, same problems with time difference, same problems with face-to-face, with cross-cultural communication, how you understand what I say.
Yeah.
There's only one big difference.
No kangaroos, right?
No kangaroos.
Yeah, there's two differences then, yeah.
Jealousness. So
And jealousy, okay. What's the other one?
No, just those two,
Okay.
I think.
Well, one of the things I'm seeing a trend in the industry is like companies that were very skeptical or downright they wouldn't accept remote workers back in the day or even up until now. They're opening up to that. They're accepting and embracing remote working just because they understand and they acknowledge that if they don't offer it, they will never hire anymore. Like people don't actually join companies that are not offering remote working, right? So how do you address this? Like in the companies you've worked, you were at Rakuten and now at Zinio, something like that, something you can explain about?
Well, many years ago, people
How about
would
the hiring?
say
How does that affect the hiring?
you open up a market
Yeah.
that's virtually infinite.
Yeah.
So we actually have, in Zinio, we have people who live far away from Barcelona city.
Yeah.
What difference does it make being in a small village in Lleida or Girona, or being in Asturias, or in Germany, or in China?
Yeah.
It's just about adapting. So a lot of companies indeed are reluctant to this model, right? For the reasons we've mentioned before, the kind of control thing.
Yep.
Same as many companies were reluctant to adopting the cloud or digitalizing their processes. So I don't think there is anything anybody can do to stop this. You can call it digital nomads, you can call it nomads, you can call it whatever you want, but this is inevitable. The cities are going to start collapsing with the amount of people we have. Barcelona is an example of that, where we bring people and people and people, especially engineers, and there's never enough. Because there's more people, there's more investment, there's more companies, and there's always a lack of engineers.
Yep.
So why would I fight for engineers with hundreds of companies which could have different perks, different salaries, different market conditions than mine, while I can go anywhere in the world and tap on that talent? So the only thing I need to do is build processes and supporting tools that allow me to thrive in that context and change the mindset.
When you hire, whether it's companies or individuals to work for your company, you know, you can only get to know them so much before you actually meet them, right? And even if you meet them in person, comes a salesperson, the CEO, whatever, you get to know them and you think, this guy is a great guy, but they might be like a shit provider anyways, right? So it's a little bit more difficult when they are extremely remote, where like in some cases you've never met the person actually in person, right? Yeah. So how would you pick up the people you want to work with or you want to hire or the agencies you want to outsource to? How would you advise people to do it here?
I think the rules are the same.
Yeah.
So the rules you follow, your hiring culture, your team culture is exactly the same. You have to be more picky on the process itself. And actually, if you can bring that person over, even if it's for lunch, that's your work. But sometimes you cannot do it. So instead of looking at it as from the context of how do you make sure it's a perfect hire, and there is no such thing as a perfect hire, I look at it from the risk perspective.
Yeah.
Well, as I've said, it's very difficult to hire engineers or anybody in Barcelona, right, with big, good talent. There's a lack of good talent.
Yeah.
So we bring people from all around the world, and we sponsor their visas, we transfer them, we give them a relocation bonus, all these kind of things. So imagine that person doesn't work out. You've already moved him or her to the other side of the world or with the family, with the visa process that's expensive. We're doing that all the time.
It's very expensive,
especially in big companies, right? So how do we make sure that's a good hire? Why wouldn't you have this person working remote with you, making sure that your company is a good fit for him and he is a good fit or she a good fit for your company, and then move forward? So visa processes are getting more and more complicated lately, not only in Spain, but also in the US, of course, and many other countries. All these are borders and boundaries that are reducing the scope of what you can do and increasing the risk. So if I start working remote for a company, and for some reason that doesn't work, my risk is little. Okay, I might have lost a month and a few months, but that's it.
Yeah.
Now, if I actually moved all the way to San Francisco to leave and I bring my family with me, holy cow, that's a big investment.
Yeah. So talking about risk, what's the most dangerous experience you have actually lived while being a digital nomad? Is there anything like...
Risk in what sense?
Risk or like dangerous, like, you know, or like I was risking my life in a small boat in whatever, like in Thailand, and we had a thunderstorm, and I was actually programming on the boat, so things like that. Do you have any
Well, probably one of the
deadly animals?
One of the deadliest places is Australia. So I
Yeah,
remember
of
this,
course.
this
Kangaroos are deadly. Well,
this
yeah.
lady
They kill
Roxanne.
people. Yeah.
So Australia is you get floods often there, right? So we were driving our little friend in there, and at some point we got a small flood, just 1 meter high in the middle of the road. So we said, what's the matter? Let's just go down and start pushing. And when we managed, after pushing for a couple of hours, so that was good exercise. I was leaner at that time.
Yeah.
We managed to get to the nearest village, and they say, "Are you guys nuts? You know that there's huge oceanic crocodiles or alligators actually go down inland to hunt the deers and whatnot when the floods come over." I'm like, oh.
Oops.
So the end of the digital nomad story would have been different.
Yeah. Glad to know you're alive. You look fine.
Yeah, I mean, this wooden leg is...
You didn't get it.
No, I didn't have anything extremely risky at all. Actually, one of the things that people usually say when you go on travel for either gap years or working remotely is, "Oh, that's very brave." I was like, brave? Why? I mean, brave is living in the same place, day in and out, and going and commuting every day. That's brave. Trying to live all your life with that and committing to a mortgage and to a standard way of life for the rest of your days. Moving around the world, meeting people, changing your lifestyle, getting to know about the real world with your own eyes, that's not brave. That's just moving forward.
Last question to wrap this up. Everybody has got a useless superpower. Sergio, what's your useless superpower?
I knew you would ask me that. So.
How did you know? I never asked this question.
Yeah, but you know what? I didn't prepare it. So.
Jesus.
No, I don't have a superpower. I think the only thing
It's a useless superpower. Something you do exceptionally well, but it's like, what do I know this for, right?
I play exceptionally bad the banjo.
Wow, man, that's a pretty good useless superpower to be bad at playing banjo.
It means that when I want to get completely by myself alone, I just start playing and suddenly I get a room full time for myself.
I think actually your wife, which I know very well, I think she said like, hey, he buys a lot of instruments he doesn't know how to play, and he thinks he knows how to play them, right?
Yeah, this is a little bit of a crossover here.
Thank you very much, Sergio. Please give it up, ladies and gentlemen. Sergio Gago.